Welcome to Faith, Fantasy, and Fairy Tales, a conversation between two Christian nerds about D&D, sci-fi, and any other nerdy stuff we can think of. I'm Seth.
I'm Monty.
Let's get nerdy together. Today's topic, we are going outside of the fantasy realm tonight. We're going to have a little bit of this sequence where we're going to talk about fantasy for the most part, and then one every third or fourth episode, we're going to try to throw in something on sci-fi. Monty, this is one of your favorite topics. What is it?
We're going off topic, and we're going to start talking about Halo. Specifically today, we're going to talk about an event, I want to say, because we're going to be talking about a certain story. But most of you would know it from the game Combat Evolved, very first Halo game.
Halo Combat Evolved on the Xbox original. Oh, man. I remember when Halo came out because I remember getting our first Xbox.
Yeah. Came with
Monty,
Need for
do you
Speed.
remember that?
I do remember it. Came with Need for Speed. Or no,
Yep.
no, it came with Burnout.
Burnout.
Not Need for... Yeah. And
there was another game that we had.
We didn't get Halo for like 6 months after we got it.
Which sucked so bad.
Because even though that was like the
Halo.
release game, yeah.
Yeah, we wanted Halo.
Right.
Yeah, that's no joke. Yeah, we got Halo 2001, which means you would have been how old, Monty?
7?
7?
No, 8.
7 years old?
Maybe 8 years old.
8 years old?
Yeah.
Let's see. And I would have been 14 or 15. 14 or 15.
Yeah.
Loved the game. I loved the Xbox. Loved the game. In fact, I remember playing on that particular Xbox, Knights of the Old Republic, when it first came out. One of my favorite games.
Yeah.
And that'll be a topic. That's a little foreshadowing. We've actually talked about that. That'll be a topic.
Definitely.
But yeah, Halo Combat Evolved kind of took what the Nintendo 64 did with GoldenEye,
Right.
and made it better. Everybody that has probably played GoldenEye back in the day, it was the quintessential first-person shooter video game of all time.
Yep.
Halo took that and
I used to play that with our grandpa.
Oh yeah, we did.
He liked playing GoldenEye. In fact,
Well,
he loved going around chopping everybody with with the hands, right?
Yep.
When it was just
two
hands.
It was two loves for Grandpa because he loved playing video games and he loved 007.
Yeah. Classic.
Yeah. But yeah, going back to that is Bungie really was what they were trying to do was capitalize on this 3D movement of first-person shooter games, and it started a massive change in first-person shooters.
Yeah.
What do you think, Monty? This is your subject.
Yeah, a little background. It actually was supposed to be like an RTS at first, right? So they were going to make like a StarCraft-like game, right? And then they were kind of dialing it in, and they came up with like the Marathon Man, which wasn't going to be a first-person shooter at first. It was going to be like a third-person action adventure, right? And they had developed the Sangheili at the time, or the Elites, sorry. They didn't actually name them yet. And if you go back and watch like the Marathon Man demo, it's really funny because the Elites don't have like those classic like 4-prong mouths.
Yeah.
They just look like dinosaurs. Right? They look like velociraptors, almost like Turok looking velociraptors, but like with armor on. It always made me laugh. But yeah, Marathon Man was what it was originally called. But then who was it? Owner of Xbox. So it would have been Bill Gates. He comes around and he goes, "Look, we're starting this thing. We want you guys to make a game for us. It looks like you have something going on. Have it ready by this date." And it was like a few months. And I could go on and on, but so this game, we're going to refer mostly to like the story regarding the game and sort of the content around it, not necessarily the gameplay, because we're not really going to review all of that stuff. But this is where it was introduced, was in 2001 by Bungie.
Right, and story is kind of what this podcast is all about.
Right.
So why is it for us that Halo is so near and dear to our hearts? Well, Monty and I, we've talked about this in the past. We're brothers, and growing up, he watched over my shoulder regularly playing video games, or we'd play together. This is actually the first game that we got where we actually were able to sit down together and play through a story together and just use our imaginations. I know this is kind of nerdy of me, but I was a 15-year-old kid with not many friends. Monty was my closest friend. He just happened to be my little brother. And we beat Halo at legendary level when he was still 8 years old or whatever it was. So this was one of our forming video games.
Yeah.
And the story for it is something that I think a lot of people really could get into if this wasn't the genre, if the genre wasn't video game, right? Or the media, wasn't video game. If it was a movie, I think a lot more people would be into it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. There was more content added to this story in a couple of different mediums. One through a book written by, I think it's Dietz. Yeah, William Dietz, or Dietz. His name's spelled Dietz. But anyway, he released a book called Halo: The Flood, which literally he was tasked to basically write the story of the Combat Evolved game, and so he went and played the game and then wrote the story for it. Basically, he followed through all of like the other stuff, but he added a lot of extra that I think is pretty compelling. And then on top of that, there's an arcade game release called Halo Fireteam Raven. It's a 2 or 4 player arcade game where you play as an ODST with like a massive gun and you're shooting at the screen, right? Like most arcade games.
I think Monty and I, we've beat that.
Yeah, I have not beat it, but maybe you have. I've played it quite a few times.
I know that you and I have come close anyways.
Yeah.
We've spent a lot of money in that particular one.
Were you at that Dave & Buster's with me when I think I took Victoria out? Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so Fireteam Raven takes place literally in the same timeline and actually fits in with some of the book lore as well, and then the book obviously fits into the game. So you get called a game like the sort of superseding lore, and then the book, and then Fireteam Raven is like sort of the cascading lore about it. Yeah, so it fictionally takes place in the future year of 2552 when humanity is on the brink, right? This is sort of a common trope in sci-fi. It's either humanity's totally in control, but they're, facing a new threat, or humanity's on the brink and they're struggling to survive in whatever situation they find themselves in. Well, in this one, the humans are on the brink of destruction because there's an alien race after them. So that's sort of like the setting. What ends up happening, that'll start us on like the first mission in the game. We'll go through the missions. Given, that there's only a few of them, we can kind of describe what part that is and then how that applies to the other lore content.
Well, and that's where I'd like to start, too. Yeah. I think that starting with the missions, just kind of walking through the story a little bit, maybe summarizing, giving a synopsis of this whole thing.
Right.
Just to give you guys an understanding, most of you out there might have already played Halo. And if you have, hopefully we don't screw this up too bad.
Yeah.
But if you haven't played it, hopefully this is just something that piques your interest into either the sci-fi realm, or specifically maybe you are a sci-fi fan. Maybe you like Star Trek, or you like Star Wars, or any of those other. I think of Firefly, one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Maybe this will get you into a different story. I know that there's a lot of books out there. Monty, you've read a few of them or listened to them on audiobook, and it really is a good. They've got good storytelling, and a lot of their storytelling, it can appease or speak to not just sci-fi fantasy people, but also people that like war movies.
Right. Yeah. No, actually, that's a good point. Our common friend Trevor, he's read a lot more of the Halo books. In fact, I think every one of them, including like the newer ones like Requiem and stuff like that. But a lot of the content of these books is like military action, kind of like a Tom Clancy, right? So it has some of that, I guess, elements to it. But anyway, so first mission, the Pillar of Autumn.
You break out, and you are awaken as John. What's his last name?
He doesn't have a
117?
Yeah, he doesn't have a last name. He has a designation. That's right.
His first name is John. His designation is 117.
Well, let me set the scene, and then I'm going to ask you like what you remember about exactly what happens.
Sure.
But so the Pillar of Autumn comes out of slip space, right? And slip space is how they travel faster than light, and it's this massive human frigate. It's miles long, if you believe the track at the end. And the ship is sort of listing through space, and you hear, if you're playing the game, you hear conversation going on between the captain and the shipboard AI, and they decide that they need to wake up like their most valuable warrior. They actually have many valuable warriors on their ship, but there's one person in particular that they believe they need, because there are Covenant, and that's the alien organization. They're like, Covenant vessels are here. They got here before us. They chased us through slip space, and they're faster, so they got here. We need to wake up the Master Chief, John 117. So that's you in the game, but narratively, it's most of the story is told through John's eyes in a lot of these stories. So John wakes up in his cryo chamber, right, his pod, and then he sort of goes through like a disorientation screening. It's a tutorial for the game, yeah. So, to see how he was affected by cryosleep. Yeah.
Use a gun.
He forgot how to look at lights.
Yeah, he forgot how to use a gun.
Look at the top light. Now look at the bottom one.
He's our best warrior, but he don't really remember how to use a gun.
Right. Well, cryosleep can do all sorts of things to you. You never know.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you hold the gun backwards or something. I don't know. You forget your first rule of firearm safety. So, so what do you remember about this stage of the game, Seth? Because this is probably the topic that you'll have the most experience with.
Well, I remember that, obviously you come out of cryosleep, and it's pretty quick that you're into a hallway that you're fighting in. The Pillar of Autumn is actually attacked by the Covenant, by ships that are boarding, or rather alien species that are boarding. Right up front, you fight a couple of grunts. Mm-hmm. Grunts are like, well, they are the grunts. They're the cannon fodder, so to speak, of the Halo alien species. Mm-hmm. And they're throwing different things at you. You're getting, if you play it in legendary mode, I remember they throw a lot more sticky grenades at you and stuff like that. Yeah. But the whole time you're being, now I don't think you have Cortana at this point.
Not right away. So you don't end up fighting anything until after you get Cortana, though.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay. So your goal is you go to kind of the ship's deck, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, the bridge. Yeah.
The bridge, and you get Cortana, who is the shipboard AI. She's downloaded onto a chip, and then you pop it into your helmet, and then she is kind of your voice in the ethereal to guide you on your next mission or whatever.
Yep.
You fight the Covenant, you fight your way off. The Pillar of Autumn at this point is getting wrecked.
Yeah.
And it's going down, essentially. Well, you jumped into slip space, and when you jumped out of slip space, you're at what they call a halo ring. And a halo ring essentially is this planet-sized ring with a biome, a livable biome on the inside of the ring.
Right.
And you're outside of this halo ring.
Well, let's back up a sec. So you just got out of mission 1. So mission 1 ends when you leave the ship. Right?
Yeah.
You end up saving a guy. You throw him. Well, you save him for a short period of time because he ends up dying in the crash. You throw him onto what's called a bumblebee, which is these escape pods, right? And you guys get on the bumblebee, shoot off into the atmosphere of the ring, and that's the end of that mission. Something interesting that happens in the book in this mission. This is probably a really great setup for what happens in the rest of the book. But sure. There is an elite. Elites are very full of themselves. They're sort of like the pinnacle fighters of the Covenant war force. They consider themselves very much like samurai. They're very honor bound and oriented culturally. So,
and you actually get that from the rest of the games. And they actually have their own name too. They're not actually called elites by by the Covenant. They're called elites by the UNSC.
Right, which is the United Naval Space Command.
Right.
Which is the sort of human combat organization, right? Military for all of space. And
right.
What these particular people, this ship and the Master Chief belong to. So anyway, this character's name is Zuka Zamami. He, like I said, he's an elite. They don't actually have the name in the book of his species, but they're the Senghili. He comes from the fleet of Particular Justice, which is the fleet that was at the Halo ring when they got there. And he's a special ops guy, right? So he's really dangerous. And if you're playing the game, you run into this guy in the game. And so you're shooting him, or, Chief is shooting him. Chief shoots him down, gets his shields broken, runs out of ammo, and he leaves, right? Now, in the story, what happens is Zamami is fatally wounded. He's about to die, but there's some grunts around, and there's a grunt. He's kind of in charge of this little group of grunts, and they're sort of walking by, and this little grunt, his name's Yap Yap. He becomes really famous in later games. Yap Yap does, as he becomes a warlord known as Yap Yap the Destroyer. But anyway, in this story, Yap Yap is a very timid and always trying to get out of things normal grunt, right? Grunts do not like to put themselves in danger. They're fearful, and the only thing that bolsters them is having somebody powerful around them, right? So all the elites are dead. This grunt looks down, sees this elite that's suffering. He knows he'll get executed if he leaves without a reason, so he picks up Zamami, right? He has no idea who he is, and he takes him back to a Covenant, attached ship. And they get on and they leave. And so Yap Yap ends up saving Zamami's life, right, through this process, because, they get him back to the ship, he gets medical care and all that great stuff. And Zamami's whole mission was to kill the demon aboard the Pillar of Autumn. They didn't call him the demon at this point. They had called them, it's like Machine Warrior or something like that. But the Spartans had a reputation, and that's what Chief is. He's a Spartan. They had a reputation of being powerful warriors, so Zamami's on the ship. Well, what happens directly after that is there's a prophet, which is an alien who's sort of in charge, and he puts Zamami, after he recovers, in charge of hunting and killing the chief. And Zamami's all about pride, right? And he enlists Yap Yap as his direct associate, right? Because he saved his life, to do everything for him. And so Yap Yap's like, oh man. Yeah, so that's to me like a really great little setup, because a lot of stuff happens in the story after that. So Chief leaves the Pillar of Autumn. The Pillar of Autumn is on a crash course for the ring, and humans aboard escape pods all over the place, because the ship has been abandoned, hit the ground. And then that's where
this, what I spoke of earlier, what is called the Halo ring, or just a Halo.
Right.
And
this is where Mission 2 starts.
And this is where Mission 2 starts, exactly. Right. And on the Halo ring, you land, and it's essentially, like I said, landing on a planet. It is a massive, massive, massive ring made of a technology that nobody really understood. It was from a group of ancient aliens.
Yep.
Aliens.
That's right.
A group of ancient aliens that had long since gone extinct, and they had left all their technology around. Well, the Halo ring that they land on just happened to also be, I believe at this point, is already under the control of the Covenant. And they're fighting, like John 117, Spartan 1117, he hits the ground in his pod, and his Autumn is right away. He's fighting on this cliff face.
Right.
And the goal for that mission is to basically round up the rest of the humans, get with the rest of the in the UNSC. They have Marines, they have naval officers, but the Marines are the fighters in Halo, along with these Spartans. The Spartan we didn't really tell you about, but the Spartans are these genetically modified humans,
right?
Who are tied into a suit that is essentially part of them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It is designed so that they function, and they're taller than most humans. They weigh more, much stronger. That's why they're able to wield some of the Covenant technology. They essentially are all around like humans,
like a cyborg super soldier is what they are.
Right, a cyborg super soldier that is 100% human, but is also integrated into this mechanical suit.
Right. And so Chief steps off, and I always laughed at this part because in the game, you kind of wake up, and Cortana wakes you up because she's in your helmet, right? And it's, there's a ringing in your ears, and you kind of look around, and there's just dead people everywhere. And I remember thinking when I first saw that, I was like, did I kill all of these people? Did I pass out and just murder them? And then you look around and you're like, oh, I'm at a crash site. Oh, okay, they must have died. Well, it still could have been Chief's fault, frankly, because he wasn't seated down. He could have just been bouncing around inside of that ship. Yeah. So either way. But yeah, he comes under attack. Some Banshees are flying over there, sort of scoping out the area. Banshee is an aircraft or spacecraft that the Covenant fly around, little one-man crafts that they use. Yep. And so they're scouting the area, and they find Chief and engage him. He immediately, goes from 0 to 10 battle mode. He fights his way all the way to a structure on the ring, looks kind of like a building, and finds a bunch of Marines held up there. And leading them is my favorite character of the entire franchise, and that would be Sergeant Avery J. Johnson.
And Avery J. Johnson is awesome.
Yes. All right. So, you round up all the Marines. You get picked up by Fohammer, which is one of the characters that you kind of get to know. She's a Pelican pilot. Pelican is sort of like the human dropship VTOL aircraft, and she becomes sort of your escort to and from. So something actually happens between Mission 2 and Mission 3. Mission 3 is the Truth and Reconciliation. And what ends up happening is Chief actually goes back, and this happens in the book. Chief goes back to a place that has been taken over by a Major Antonio Silva. Major Silva was one of Captain Keyes, or Colonel Jacob Keyes. That's the captain of the Pillar of Autumn. He was one of the direct officers to Captain Keyes, and he was the head of the Marine detachment. The ODST detachment of the Pillar of Autumn. The Pillar of Autumn, this doesn't actually come up in the game at all, but there were ODST soldiers, which stands for Orbital Drop Shock Troopers.
Essentially, they are like the Navy SEALs of the UNSC.
Yes. And this guy, Antonio Silva, is very proud of that. They come down in their HEVs, their human entry vehicles, which are like these pods with rockets on them to keep them from exploding when they come into impact. But it's just a single person sits in this pod. You have a little bit of control, and it just falls from space to whatever surface they're headed to. Him and all of his ODST soldiers just hit the ground. They look around. They see a butte, right? It's a terrain formation. Like a mesa, It in the book refers to it as a butte because it's much wider, right?
Sure.
And they decide that is where we're going to establish Alpha Base. And so Chief is brought to this base that they set up, and they have the ODST are rocking it. They've got freaking turrets and landing pads, and they've killed a bunch of Covenant that were already there and took their shade turrets is what they're called, which are these massive plasma turrets that are manned turrets, like an anti-aircraft weapon. They've started a prig already and thrown soldiers that were trying to desert in there, and this is not even a day in, right? And Alpha Base is rocking under this guy, Antonio Silva. But he has some flaws. This guy is obsessed with power, right? Or I should say not power, but glory, okay? And he hates Spartans, right? In fact, he says to Chief, when Chief arrives, he says, so here's the deal. I'm short on a captain. So Lieutenant McKay, and that he's pointing to a female officer who happened to be with him at the time, is serving as my XO. So if either of us says crap, then I expect you to ask what color, how much, and where you want it. Do you read me? He says that to Chief, and Chief Chief Petty Officer. He's he may not be a major, and he still has to answer to officer ranks, but that's not normally a way that you speak to somebody of that status, militarily wise.
Because
and
they usually have served at that point for a longer period of time.
Right, exactly. Especially between a major and Chief Petty Officer. So anyway, John doesn't really respond to that, but Silva says, and I remember this distinctly from the book because this was such an impactful moment for me. He was like, listen, this war is going to be won on the bodies of flesh and blood, not on the backs of cyborgs, right? He's like, your people, you're a menace, and mankind can overcome anything, right? And he's like, I was inspired by this little speech that was in a book, right? Anyway, so Chief goes there, and Alpha Base sort of becomes the hub for like deployment and everything, and then Mission 3 begins, and that is the beginning of the Truth and Reconciliation, which is the name of a Covenant ship that had been damaged during the battle with the Pillar of Autumn.
I don't remember, Monty. Wasn't the Truth and Reconciliation still? It was damaged, but it was still airborne.
Right, it's still flying.
It was still flying in essentially around the in the atmosphere of the Halo ring.
Yeah, it couldn't really go anywhere. It was under repairs, and they were actually collecting resources from the ring in order to repair it, and they had set up a grav lift pad. And so, do you remember what you needed to do in this mission?
What do you mean?
Well, it starts out, you're given a sniper.
I remember
you're given a sniper rifle, right? Which is it's a 30 millimeter, by the way. It's a massive round. You're given a 30 millimeter sniper rifle, and it has night vision optics on the scope, right?
Right. And I remember you're on a cliff face, you're sneaking around, and you're sniping elites and the jackals. You're sniping jackals and stuff like that. And essentially, you're trying to make it to that grav lift.
Yes.
Where they've got like a bunch of cargo and stuff like that they've been shipping supplies back to and from the Truth and Reconciliation.
Right.
And that's what you use to infiltrate the ship.
Right. And just before that happens, just before Chief gets on that grav lift, is when they find the first Lek Golo, the hunters, right?
Come
down from the Truth and Reconciliation. It's the first time in the game that you fight them, right? And you've already gone through 2 missions. You've never seen these things before. But they're pretty intense, especially as far as their combat forms go.
Their combat form is pretty intense because they are essentially just these giant spike covered entities, and they always hunt. They're always hunting in packs, in pairs.
Yeah,
in pairs.
Right.
And what I thought was actually really, really, really cool when you actually got into the lore of a hunter was what they are.
Yeah.
Because essentially these aren't one being, right? They are a mass of worms essentially inside a piece of armor, and that's what motivates, or it's what brings to life basically this suit of armor. It's
they're like a hive mind creature, and when they get into their form, they kind of exomorph or whatever into like a sort of a humanoid figure, right? 2 legs, 2 arms, but they're really just filling the armor up, right, with all of these worms, and they kind of act like they tighten around each other and stuff, so they kind of act like muscle tissue in that way.
And what's cool is if you've ever played the game, you probably didn't know this, because a lot of people don't know this about the hunters, but if you go up after you kill one and just inspect the bodies, you can actually see the individual worms wrapped around each other and stuff in portions of the armor. And then again, this is lore that if you look it up in any of the official stuff or some of the books, you'll find exactly what Monty and I are talking about. Hunters are really cool creatures, and after Monty and I actually found this out long time ago, every time I've shot or every time I've fought a hunter since. I always go up and I'm like, oh yeah, there's one of the things, and I'll poke it with my gun,
Yeah.
Because they really are a cool thing. But you fight these hunters, and they're very difficult to fight because the armor that they wear is essentially bulletproof. So very difficult to fight, and they're running amok, destroying things around, and then finally you get them down. You mount the grav lift up into the Truth and Reconciliation,
right?
In order to bring it down.
Yep,
that's what the goal is.
And so there's actually a couple of different things. So they're actually going into the Truth and Reconciliation to recover Captain Keyes. Captain Keyes was captured by the Covenant after he sort of self-landed the Pillar of Autumn. The Pillar of Autumn was going to get destroyed if it had gone down automatically, so he kind of gets at the helm, flies it to the surface himself, and survives, which kind of is impressive because the bridge of this craft is on the bottom.
Yeah.
So the fact that he lived kind of doesn't make a lot of sense, but the bridge is intact when you find the crashed ship, so I guess, he did something right. So the Covenant immediately go to the ship, and he's the only one there, so they capture him, right? And then they find some other Marines, they capture them too, and then they take them to the Truth and Reconciliation, and they're using it for, while it's being repaired, they're also using it as a brig for the human prisoners. Captain Keyes gets interrogated a bunch of times because the Covenant did not know about the location of this ring, and it's like a holy symbol to them.
Yeah.
And so when this human ship that they were just following through slipspace happened to just arrive, magically, right? The odds are astronomical, infinitesimal, whatever you want to say. It would have been impossible to get there without extremely dumb luck or some kind of coordination from your shipboard AI. So the Covenant suspect that the humans know something, and so they're interrogating Keyes about it.
Yep.
And anyway, so you kind of go through the whole ship, and you end up finding Keyes, and then you get attacked by a couple of Zuka Zamamis, his special ops elites.
Yes.
And you probably remember this, Seth, because all you see is a glowing blue sword.
Yep, and the fact is they are invisible.
Mm-hmm.
They've got technology that cloaks their bodies, which you actually can use later on. You're able to find that particular technology and use it as well. But when they come out, they've got these plasma swords that are pretty much like a lightsaber, can pretty much cut through anything, and they attack you and the rest of the Marines that are there. I think, if I remember correctly, a couple of Marines do die from the Zuka Zamami's elite soldiers.
Yeah.
Some of these guys get slashed in half by the blades, and then you fight them, you take them down, and it's only a few of them. It's like 2 or 3, right?
Yeah. Well, in the book, if I remember right, Chief sees them before they attack, but he doesn't save like one person, and that's it.
Yeah.
But like, if you're playing Legendary, good luck saving Captain Keyes at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding.
Everybody's gonna die. Just hope that you can get through.
He'll be alive in the next mission.
Right. Well, it'll start you over if he dies.
Oh, I remember.
From the checkpoint.
I remember.
Yeah.
It was so difficult. I mean, just getting into the gameplay just a little bit, it was a very difficult game to play on Legendary. It was fun, and it was especially fun because, having a partner like you at the time, and even subsequent games that we've played together as far as playing Halo together.
Yeah.
We've done Legendary together because we play off well of each other,
Right.
and do a really good job getting through them. But yeah, you fight these, for lack of a better term, invisible elites, and kill them, and try to blow up the ship and get out of there.
Well, you end up getting some information from them regarding a particular place that they call the Silent Cartographer. It's on you're at the ship bridge. and they're like they're looking for something. They're Cortana's sort of reading the ship information.
Those exact words are from Cortana.
Yeah.
They're looking for something.
Yes,
they're here. They're looking for something.
Right.
Yeah.
And so Captain Keyes is like, oh, that's cool. That sounds like something that we want to get to first. So we're going to do that. And Captain Keyes, he's flown a Covenant dropship before. And so he gets everybody on this Covenant dropship. Yeah. I think it's a Spectre.
Yeah.
But anyway, it looks like a tuning fork with a turret on the back. But
right.
He can fly it, so Captain Keyes gets everybody aboard the dropship and they fly away, right? And the Truth and Reconciliation ends up getting repaired later. But yeah, and then you're off to the Silent Cartographer. What happens in between? They go back to the base. Captain Keyes takes charge over the military officers, right? Including Antonio Silva. But they discover... So... They're kind of back there, and they send. I guess that would happen afterwards. They send Chief and a group of Marines to go take an island where this quote unquote silent cartographer is. You remember this mission? This one's really famous.
The silent cartographer mission.
Yeah. Do you remember how it starts?
If I remember how this starts, let's see. I believe we are flying on a. With Fohammer, she's flying us in, right?
Yep. So you're in.
She's the one flying us in, in the Pelican. We fly in, and this one is during the daytime.
Yep.
Essentially, and you land outside of this massive, what looks like kind of like a pyramid sort of structure.
Yep.
That you find is actually a Forerunner. It's a Forerunner building, basically, and you go. The Covenant is already there. The Covenant is already trying to get in there, trying to essentially get into the place.
Yeah.
Right. They're not actually in it. They've gotten around it. They've surrounded it. They've gotten into like the foyer, so to speak, of the place.
Well, they actually get all the way up to a place where they can control the security gates.
Yes.
And they're trying to figure out how to utilize this. So you just said Forerunner, right? This ancient alien technology that the Covenant people worship, right? The Covenant aliens worship these beings that they call the Forerunners, right? Which are just those who came before us, right? That's literally what it means. But the Forerunners is sort of the colloquial name that they come up with for these ancient aliens.
Remind me, Monty, am I right here? When you're dropped off, you're dropped off on the beach outside of this thing.
Yes. Yeah, you're dropped off on the beach. It's such a cool scene too, because it's like, all right, give them hell, Marines. That's Fohammer, right? And you're dropping off of the ship, right? And there's already a battle going on. It's a beachfront assault.
It's essentially like D-Day.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is
maybe not
only
to that scale,
mission
but
4. This is only mission 4 of 10.
Yes, but Captain Keyes was so invested in this, right, that he's like this, and he has a little fight with Major Silva about it. But he's like, we are going there, and we're sending a large force. And Silva's like, no, we need to protect the Pillar of Autumn. We need to figure out how to get off this ring. We need to figure out how to contact the rest of the human fleet. And Captain Keyes is like, no, we're not having any of that. We're not getting backup. We're doing this ourselves, and we're going. And so, they send this massive force, and they do end up taking the island. But it takes some time because, like I said, the Covenant have embedded themselves pretty deep into the structure, to this security checkpoint place.
Right.
In which, eventually Cortana allows you to use her to access the Forerunner tech, which the Covenant couldn't do, which gives you access to their map room, which is what the Silent Cartographer is. It's a map room.
Yep. And that moves pretty seamlessly. It's not a separated mission almost. You've got another mission almost right after that where Cortana accesses the room, and then it's the assault on the control room mission. That's the next mission almost right away.
Well, the assault on the control room actually takes place after you get the map, and then Forerunner ends up taking, so it's underground, this quote unquote control room that they're looking for, right? Because even though the Silent Cartographer is a map room, it's not complete. and they're trying to get control of this Halo structure, right?
Yep.
And Captain Keyes, his opinion is, well, we don't want that to happen, right? We want the Covenant to definitely not have control of this massive superstructure that we found in outer space randomly. So yeah, it's underground, and they have to fly through the structure, right? And so they open up like a big old hatch, and they fly their Pelican down into it.
And it's a massive, like you say, it's a massive structure.
Yeah.
But yeah, you get into the control room, and the control room is very, very technologically designed. It is that Forerunner tech, everything, because the Halo ring itself is made by the Forerunners, and you're going down there. Your goal is to control the ring before the Covenant does.
Right. So in the control room, it kind of reminds me of like Xavier's what is that place? Cerebro. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's
Professor X.
Yeah, Xavier. Yeah. Sorry, I should have said X-Men, huh? But it's a big sphere, and then there's like a single stem catwalk out to like a center platform.
Massive sphere, though.
Yeah, it's huge. It's way bigger than Xavier's sphere.
Yeah. He'd be lucky to have this.
Right. You'd probably kill him. But you take and you insert Cortana into the control room, and Cortana starts freaking out. She's like, "Oh no, the fools! Couldn't they have known?" And Chief is like, "Are you gonna? What's going on? You gonna talk to me, Cortana?" And she's like, "There's no time to talk. Get out of here. Go find the Covenant right now. They're at this location. You need to leave." Right?
Yep.
And Chief's like, "Okay." He just starts running. And from the game's perspective, it cuts directly to Master Chief, basically by himself, getting dropped off at a location in a jungle at night. But what happens between those 2 points is Captain Keyes, who's still back at Alpha Base, they had discovered while Chief was underground going toward the control room with the other Marines that were with him, through the Covenant chatter, they discover that there is a Forerunner weapons depot, what they believe is a weapons depot, right? And again, Keyes is like, we can't let them get any power. We've got to go to this weapons depot. And so Captain Keyes heads a mission, right, along with Sergeant Johnson and a very important character, Private Jenkins. And he's important. You'll find out a little bit more later, Seth, because you don't actually know this part. But Jenkins does show up in the game. He's part of Sergeant Avery Johnson's squad. So Captain Keyes is with Sergeant Johnson. They go into this Forerunner structure. But before we talk about that part, Seth, I'll let you start on the 343 Guilty Spark mission. Just talk a little bit about it.
I don't remember exactly how the 343 Guilty Spark started, to be honest.
So you get dropped off in a jungle. You kind of fight through the jungle. There's like some dead humans everywhere. There's some dead Covenant, and you're kind of like, what? Okay, a battle happened here. The humans must have fought their way in, right? Is what it looks like.
Right.
The book narrative is identical to this.
You fight through all of that to get to another
Forerunner building,
right?
And it goes underground, and then there's an elevator that takes you down. Well, after all of this, Chief ends up finding a door that has been artificially locked by a human, like a hack pad, right? That's like attached to the door. It's a Forerunner door, and usually they just open and close, on their own. But this has like stasis locked the door, and he's like, okay, I don't know why that is. He punches the code in to unlock it. It unlocks the door, and a body falls on him.
Yeah.
Chief is like, okay, a little confused because this human body doesn't have there's no Covenant around. And he finds and picks up a helmet. Chief goes around. He's actually collecting dog tags at this point in the book. Because Chief is he's a soldier to the core, right? He cares a lot about these sort of fallen comrades of his. But he finds the helmet, and he's like, okay, I need to investigate what's going on. He finds a helmet, which all the helmets have cameras and sort of record everything of Private Jenkins. And that's all he has is just the helmet. He pulls the chip out, it slots it into his helmet, and then the video plays. Do you remember the video?
Is this where we first see just a glimpse of the danger ahead?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So essentially, the video that he watches is all of these humans not being attacked by Covenant. It's actually the Covenant and the humans being attacked by the big bad of Halo, and that's the Flood.
Right. Exactly.
Which is essentially it's a diseased alien fungus almost that infects humanoids and different biological species and things like that to control them and grow its entity, its hive mind like entity across the universe. It is literally a plague on the entirety of the galaxy.
Yeah. All it does is just consume biomass. That's like its whole goal. There's some complex flood forms out there, but when you first, and even in the book too, and I listened to the audiobook, and this part of the book is epic, just like it was in the game, playing it for the first time. Playing this as a kid scared the heck out of me. Oh my gosh. I'm not joking. So
I'm not going to advocate, by the way, for playing this with young kids. I was a teenager at the time.
It is rated M. It is rated M.
It is rated
There's some
M
swearing in the game. But I've definitely let all of my kids play it because they love Halo. But even my son acts the same way. He's like, Dad, I don't want to play the flood missions. And I'm like,
yeah,
you don't have to, buddy. I get it. Trust me, I get it.
I get it.
Because I remember playing this and I was like, no, I'm freaking out because it was like,
oh yeah,
it was just so
there's some good jump
scares.
Scary. There's some good jump scares in there too.
Marty O'Donnell, who wrote the score for this game, right? And most of the games coming, and Michael Salvatore, who is a really famous guitarist, right?
Yep.
These two guys orchestrated for the first Halo game, and this right? It's like the it was like it got me, man. It really did. And so anyway, Chief sees Private Jenkins get attacked by the Flood poppers, is what they're commonly referred to as. They look like 6-inch by 6-inch little balls of air. Like little balloons, right, with tentacles in the bottom.
With little feet, tentacles on them,
right.
Like centipedes almost.
Yeah. And so
except they're just like a balloon.
Yeah. I'd say it's more like an octopus, but like a land octopus that looks like it's got fungus all over it. But anyway, so Captain Keyes, Sergeant Johnson, they're both part of, this squad. They're getting attacked. And Private Jenkins, the video feed cuts out at Private Jenkins getting a flood spore jumping onto his face, a flood popper, right? That's what we're gonna call him. And Chief throws the card down out of his helmet. He looks around, and in the book, the first thing that he sees is not what you see in the game. In the game, some doors. You're in a square room, and there's doors on either side. They break open, and just a ton of the poppers come running out at you, and they'll pop on your shields, right? Because they can't get through the shields. You have plasma shields, right? But if they break your shields and they get you, you die instantly, right? Because they're squirm their tentacles into your armor. But in the book, the first thing he sees is a dead human, and the book describes it in gory detail, right? The bones of this man are broken and twisted into new forms as the face has been shifted to the left and closer to the shoulder, eyes rolled and sunken in the face strewn longer than it should be, with the jaw clearly broken and unhinged from the top of the skull. The creature moans as the tentacle coming out of the top of its neck lurches forward, trying to grab the Chief, and Chief has a shotgun at this point, and he blows it away, right?
Yep.
That's how the book describes it. That is an epic moment, right? That got me into the book for sure. And then you meet at this point, at the end of 343 Guilty Spark.
Yes, you meet a spark, is what they're called throughout all the Halo games. and they are
an oracle,
basically little flying AI-like droids, almost kind of like from Star Wars. For the most part, what they are is like a librarian. Like they keep information, and they were built by the Forerunners. They were information dumps, so to speak. And but they were AI. They were even capable of fighting to a certain extent. They had little lasers on them that they could shoot stuff.
Yeah.
And you talk to him, and you find from this particular Spark what's really going on.
Yeah. So Guilty Spark is his name.
Hold up for a second.
Yeah.
I just this epiphany moment here.
Right.
His name is 343 this is the mission name, 343 Guilty Spark.
Yep.
Is 343 Guilty Spark the mission? Is that where 343 the company got its name?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. Yep.
I did not know that.
Yep.
So 343, the company that actually makes all the Halo games now.
Yeah, they're current license holders for the games.
Current license holders for the games now.
The whole franchise.
They actually are named after Halo.
Yes. Yep.
That's awesome.
Particularly this
mission.
This guy, right? Because his codex name, right? His entire name is 343 Guilty Spark. He's the monitor. He introduces himself as the monitor of Installation 04. Right? That's what he says. It's actually kind of funny. The voice actor for 343 Guilty Spark, you mentioned Star Wars. He made up this character based on C-3PO.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yes. So that's
awesome.
A little bit of sci-fi tie-in. All right. But yeah.
Little bit of nerd eggs.
So Guilty Spark comes in and he's like, you seem to be doing very well at handling this infestation. Would you like to come and help me get the defenses online so that we can suppress the flood outbreak? Well, he actually does it in more of a demanding way, because he basically says, you're going to come with me, and you're going to help me get the flood controlled. Well, Chief is amenable to it, because he's like, okay, I mean, that makes sense. The flood are obviously bad. We should do that, right? And then you go through the worst. Objectively, among everybody who has ever played Halo, this is the worst mission that exists. Probably in first-person shooters altogether. I can't think of one that I would hate more.
The library.
Yes, the library.
And all of the fighting against the freaking flood that you have to do, because there is so much. There's a reason it's called the flood. Mm-hmm. They're every freaking where. Yeah. I mean, they're even in my raccoon wounds. They're everywhere.
Yes.
But yeah, so essentially you're following the monitor the whole time. He kind of he does shoot poppers every once in a while with his little laser, but for the most part, you're fighting them all.
Well, in the game, yes, he's basically not even there. He's like, I've got to go open a door. Bye. I hope you live. And the monitor has he doesn't actually end up shooting any flood. You don't find out he has a laser until a little later. He has sentinels, right? The little flying guardian. They're just like automated defense robots. They'll come in and help you, but they don't last long usually.
That's right.
And so this part of the book really, really short. This actually it cuts away to what's going on at Alpha Base. And because basically there's not really much narratively happening. Chief is going to the library to pick up a thing called the Icon, which is the key to controlling the Halo ring, right? Without the Icon or the Index, you can't...
Index.
Right. It's called both things, right? It's called the Icon by the Covenant. I
remember it being called the Index, yeah.
Yes. Yes. Guilty Spark calls it the Index. Without the Index, you can't control, or you can't fire the ring, which is another thing that we'll have to talk about later. But anyway, what's happening back at Alpha Base is actually really interesting. So Captain Keyes is missing. John is now missing, right? He's not responding to calls.
The Spartan 117.
Right. Cortana is not responding. Major Silva, he's like, okay, we got to figure out what's going on. He sends some ODST to the same place where all the Flood are.
Yep.
And you know who they find? Private Jenkins.
What?
Yes.
Alive?
Alive. At the top of the elevator, converted to Flood form.
Oh, okay.
Private Jenkins is alive. He still can think. Can't control his body.
But he can... What?
Yes. This is the only time I've ever heard this in Halo lore, right?
Yeah.
So Jenkins is slowly turning into a Flood spawn, right? A combat form of the Flood. And he had actually already killed some other humans down in the structure, right?
Okay.
Out of not his own will, right? And Jenkins wants to kill himself. That's all he can think about. But he cannot move a single part of his body.
Because he's overrun at that point by the Flood's mental capacity and everything else.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
So the hive mind supposed to take control of your own mind, but we find out from Captain Keyes a little later on that it's possible to resist. Jenkins is doing that resisting. And he's resisting because he was the lowest member of his squad, right? And everybody except for Sergeant Johnson gets killed, right?
Yep.
And it was basically his fault. And so he feels such dread of responsibility for that he just cannot let the Flood hive mind, which is not quite as strong as it could have been, and probably would have taken him over if there was a full mind involved. But that's another topic we can go on about later. Anyway,
much later.
This squad, it's actually led by McKay, which is the lieutenant, the XO, right? They capture him, and they take him back to Alpha Base.
He's actually is he used as a experiment at that point?
So
do they study on him then?
Yes, they do study him. They basically put him in the brig, right?
Right.
And they do like all sorts of tests. They do like simple ones at first because there's not like any scientists there, right? They do take some samples that they have. I don't know if I want to bring them up yet. Wellesley, Duke of Wellington. He is another AI, just like Cortana is, just a little less, essentially the same advancement. Considers himself an old duke from like old England. Talks with that manner, and actually considers his own war efforts as like his knightly duty. It's kind of a funny AI. But anyway, they take samples. They take samples of portions of Jenkins over to Wellesley. Wellesley turns another cheek like immediately. He's like, usually he's really sassy and like uptight and British.
Right.
and then he's like, oh crap. This is really bad. We need to destroy him immediately. And then, a bunch of people object because that's Jenkins and they, care about him and stuff. They're like, we got to find a cure or whatever. Well, there is actually really an interesting resolution to that. Jenkins steals a grenade off of Covenant when the Covenant make it to Alpha Base and kills himself.
Oh, wow.
He's able to do it. Yeah, he wills his power through, steals a plasma grenade, sticks it to his chest, and blows up. He dies. Sort of an epic moment. But that's Private Jenkins, yeah. You didn't know that.
That's Private Jenkins.
He had an entire mission that a lot of people didn't know.
So essentially, everybody doesn't know that because most people don't read the book.
Right, exactly. Which is why that is like
a pretty nice little side story.
It's a good expansion, absolutely.
Yeah,
and definitely when it pulls you away from the library, it's like anything to pull me away from the library, right?
Yeah.
So,
anything to keep me out of that place.
So we've got two betrayals left where we're at. Yep.
We've got two betrayals. The two betrayals, Monty, go ahead.
So in this one, Chief makes it back to the control room after a long and arduous fight. And the fighting is all in the books. It's in the game as well. And this is probably the longest part of everything. In the books, it sort of describes like Chief like shoving his MA5B, which is a 308 automatic assault rifle bullpup. For those of you who care, that's linked to his visor, so he can aim with it with a little crosshair that he just wherever he points, the crosshair is on his visor, and that shows him where it's going to go. The assault rifle.
Oh, the assault rifle.
Right. The one that just shoots in every direction, it looks like. Anyway.
Yeah. That doesn't actually hit anything ever. You feel like you feel a little like a stormtrooper.
Yeah. Yeah, I never understood that. It's like, wouldn't guns advance when they get like straighter? Anyway.
Yeah.
So he makes it back to the control room where Cortana's at. Cortana's livid with him. She's like, "Where were you?" I was helping this guy. Points over to Guilty Spark, and Spark is like, "Yeah, he's helping me. You know, we're gonna turn the defense system on for." Well, Chief actually says this to Cortana. We're gonna turn Halo's defense system on. He puts the icon or the index into the system, but it doesn't turn on. And Spark is like, "That's weird." Cortana's like, "Yeah, bet you didn't know I was in here." She's like, she comes up and she goes, "I got your index, so you can go." What does she say? "You can float and sputter." Yeah, and Spark gets upset because he's like, "I'm going to purge this AI." And that is when you discover, so the two betrayals. The first betrayal is Cortana seemingly is betraying you, right? Because you put the index in and the defense systems don't come online. The Flood are everywhere at this point. They've killed tons of the Covenant. The war has broken out. There's dead humans everywhere. We God knows how many are left.
Yep.
From Chief's perspective, the humans are all going to be gone at this point if these defenses don't get online. So it seems like Cortana betrays you, but she's really betraying Spark, right? And Guilty Spark betrays you by the revelation that the entire ring structure is a weapon.
Yep.
Right? And it has, what is it? It's like 25 galactic radii, right? It's like 1/4 of the range. I can't remember how he puts it. But it's essentially 1/4 of the galaxy will be like covered by the weapon's range. Yes, by the weapon's range. And the weapon essentially just sends out an anti-life pulse. And the way Cortana describes it is, it doesn't kill the Flood. It kills their food. It kills everything the Flood eats. Biomass. You, me, Covenant, plant life. It doesn't matter. Everything goes. Yep. Right? And Spark is like, well, Spark actually says something really interesting. He says, "Why would you keep yourself from doing what you've done before? Last time you asked me, should we do it? I've had a lot of time to think about it. And the only answer is, we must fire the rings. It's the only way of stopping the Flood." And so suddenly, the entire narrative of the Forerunners has expanded to the Forerunners were destroyed by this. The people who built these massive rings were far more advanced than the Covenant or the humans at this point, right? And that's sort of a really, really cool revelation in this part of the story.
Shot it and killed themselves.
Right. And then the second to last mission is Keys. So everything's falling apart. They don't really know what to do, but Captain Keyes has been captured again. And it looks like he's on the Truth and Reconciliation.
Again.
Ironic. However, the Truth and Reconciliation is way busted up. The ship is like falling apart. It's been attacked by the Flood while it was under repairs. It did get repaired, but then the Flood get up there and they start tearing it apart. And so Chief makes his way with a force of humans with him to find Captain Keyes. And do you remember what they find? So they make it to the bridge of the Truth and Reconciliation. And on the ship is Captain Keyes. He's been on comms the whole time, but he's just been saying his name and ID number over and over again. Jacob Keyes. Serial number 01928199912-JK.
Over and over and over again.
He's just saying that over and over, and it's because he has been taken over by the Flood. And the Flood mind is actually trying to penetrate Captain Keyes' mind, because Captain Keyes knows of a very important place to the Flood. Earth. And what's interesting is he is essentially the Flood's key to
Earth.
Yes. And so You find him, you put your fist through his skull, right? If you're playing the game, same thing happens in the book. Chief punches through Key's head to reach specifically Captain Key's data chip so that they could access the Pillar of Autumn's control system.
So that they can destroy the ring and keep the information away from the Flood.
Right. And keep Spark from firing the ring. Very important, right? So yeah, punch through his skull, take this little chip that's embedded at the back of his head, puts it into Chief's helmet, and they end up going to the Pillar of Autumn.
Which is a busted up, mangled mess when you get to it.
Lots of battles have been fought. So between Fireteam Raven and the book, tons of battles have already been fought around the Pillar of Autumn. And
on, in, and around it.
Yep. There are humans just dead everywhere.
And there's a bunch of dead Covenant, too. And by this time...
The humans had stolen ghosts and stolen banshees. So they had a bit of Covenant firepower on their side, so they were doing okay.
And eventually the Flood make it there as well.
Yes. Right. So Chief, in order to destroy the ship, he can't set the reactor to meltdown. He has to do it manually. He ends up taking M9 frag grenades and just shoving them down the pipe. Sort of a manual process, but when you interrupt a fusion reaction with a grenade, apparently that causes some kind of massive detonation. Now, now real life, we can talk about this a little bit. Maybe there's like some fission happening, and the fission causes a fusion reaction. In fact, actually, we could get into that. There's lore about this canonized lore about how the fusion reactors work in the Halo universe. Anyway, but in real life, a fusion reaction is sort of self-defeating, right? It automatically would go out if you removed any of the energy or the material from the thing. It would just sputter out really quickly without a dense gravitational pull to put all the things together. Anyway, so he throws those in, and this is where Zuka Zamami and Yap Yap come back. Well, actually, Yap Yap ends up abandoning Zamami and leaving.
Oh yeah, because he comes in late, like games later.
Well, like I said, I think the book describes him as dying, but he definitely is all over. Like, he's in Halo 5.
Yep.
He's in the game, right? You can find it anyway. So there's a moment where you're sort of walking towards an elevator, Seth, if you remember in the game, just after you have started the chain reaction of all of the fusion reactors going off, right?
Right.
And the elevator just like falls down in front of you, right? And it's busted. Well, the book changes that up. It says the elevator rises, and on it is a shade turret and a bunch of grunts. Well, something kind of similar happens. Let's see. It's not, so there's not a shade turret, but there is an elite and a bunch of grunts on the elevator, and then the elevator comes from the top and kills all of them, right?
Right.
That's what happens in the game. Well, that elite is Zamami.
Yeah.
And the way that the book describes it is that Chief walks up to the elevator shaft, takes a couple more grenades, those last two, and tosses them down there where Zamami's at. And to add insult to injury, just...
I guess. Here we go.
He's like, bye. And then he climbs up, or he like takes like the metal, pulley rope strand that was holding the elevator, takes it up to the next level. And then Chief gets on a bomber. I'm trying to remember the name. I think it's called a Longsword. Is the name of the ship. They get on a Longsword. It's just Chief and Cortana. Only two people left. And
pretty much everybody else was dead at this point.
and they fly off the ring. Well, that's not necessarily true.
I know.
So the book has an excellent end to Major Silva. And the rest of the ODST. Yes, Fullhammer dies during. So you remember you're like going to like a place where Fullhammer can fly by and pick you up.
Right.
Yeah, she gets shot down and dies. Right.
That's right. Yep, that's right.
In what, for some reason, there's like a platform, that one small tiny platform that connects two massive sides of the ship, and in it is just a canyon that Fullhammer flies between. That's a difficult thing to understand from an engineering perspective, but we're just going to ignore that little guy. Anyway.
That little guy? Don't worry about that little guy.
Exactly. So Major Silva, he finds out about the Truth and Reconciliation, has been grounded, but it's still able to fly.
Right.
Right? He takes all of his Marines, everybody he's got left, right? All of his ODST. Now, he still has a pretty sizable fighting force, right? Especially with all the ODST with him. And they lead an assault on the Truth and Reconciliation. Silva ends up taking it. They get it. They're on the Truth and Reconciliation. They've killed most of the Covenant, but some flood spores escape into the walls of the Truth and Reconciliation. Silva pushes aside the body of Captain Keyes, and he says, "We're taking this home. We're going to Earth."
And that's how the next game starts.
No. That's funny, though. Captain Silva, he starts putting the coordinates in. He's going to take them to Earth and everything through using the slip space drive. There is a fiber optic energy connector that connects the bridge to the ship's engines in the back.
Yeah.
McKay is like, "No, we cannot take the flood to Earth. This violates the Cole Protocol, which is that Earth must be kept safe at all cost. If it's between your life and Earth, you die, right?
Yeah.
That's the Cole Protocol. In no way can you ever give away the location of Earth, because then humanity is doomed." And so McKay, she betrays Silva, and she uses, I think, a grenade, actually. She uses a grenade, and she sticks it in the energy line. It blows up, and it disconnects the engines from the bridge, and the engines just overpower, and the ship crashes into the ring, and then the Pillar of Autumn goes off, and it kills all of them.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of information.
Yes.
That's a little bit more than a synopsis.
Yes. Yes.
That's the game, guys.
Right.
And the wonderful thing about the story of Halo is the continuation that we see. Yeah, we've got this great savior-like character in John 117, and he really is. He really is that guy who is. He's good for good's sake, almost.
He's caring. He's stoic. He's a tortured soul, right? He's like
tortured soul. Yeah.
So he's been like really betrayed and like treated poorly by humans, but he still cares. He still considers himself as a dutiful and perpetual soldier and or person who sacrifices for humanity. Certainly for men, I think that this is this really speaks to me.
I agree. I think that the character of John 117, and again, we don't really, if I remember correctly, we don't really get his name right away in the game. It's a little while before we find out his first name and the only name that he's known by. And he really does work, even with the friends that he has that betray him. I mean, there are a lot of betrayals. Mm-hmm. Cortana is one of the major ones, because he serves with Cortana for many, many, many missions, battles, video games, and she betrays him. That's for another podcast. But we told you a story tonight, and I hope that story is compelling for you guys.
Yep.
The truth is, a lot of men, I think, could take some lessons, I suppose you could say, from John 117's life and his actions throughout the Combat Evolved game, throughout all of the Halo games. Because one thing that he has above all is honor and duty. Mm-hmm. And he's even recognized by the Sangheili, the elites in the game. They're called the elites, but the Sangheili is their race later on, as an honor-bound and dutiful. He's a human. They don't like him, but they see they see his honor.
Right.
That's something that I think that is it's not just one of those things. It's like a good thing that we can glean from the story of Halo. That's one thing that really would point us to using it in our own personal real lives.
Yeah.
That's what stories are all about. They're meant to teach us stuff, and this is a story that could teach you something.
Yeah, definitely.
So, we've gone long tonight.
Yep.
This is the longest one so far. I apologize, those of you that have stuck it out with us for the story tonight. I appreciate you. We're thankful for you. I hope that you enjoyed this. Give us some feedback, some reviews on our knowledge of this particular sci-fi genre. I hope that this is right up your alley. We're going to continue next week with another episode in the D&D realm, starting off with another city. Our next podcast episode subject is going to be on the Underdark city of Menzoberranzan, or Menzoberranzan, depending on how you say it. I'm pretty excited about that because that's my city, and I can't wait to talk about it. But get out there, review, subscribe, give us some suggestions and feedback. And one last thing I'd like to say before we sign off tonight is find a story and enjoy it. Monty?
Go and pop those flood spores. Have a good night.
Amen. Out.
Well, you hear Captain Keyes right at the beginning of the game. He goes, "We made a blind jump. How did they?"
Oh, yeah.
And Cortana goes, "Get here before us? The Covenant ships have always been faster." And that's the interesting part about slip space is you still spend time traveling through slip space. It's not instantaneous warp travel, you go into that higher dimension and you kind of stay there for a while and travel across it.
It's like it's obviously done differently, but it's like any of those fast travel, hyperspace, light speed, faster than light.
Yeah, I guess, see, that's the thing, too, is like, when you get into sci-fi, almost none of them treat faster than light travel as a scientist would. Even in the movie Interstellar, which is like densely based off of not non-fiction, right?
Yeah.
It was originally written by Chris Nolan's brother. He's a PhD physicist, right?
Astrophysicist.
And then they had a scientist, consultant, and his partner rewrite the script and then consult for the entire movie. And there were two rules. Everything must be based in science and nothing must be based in the imagination of the director, right? When they went out to make the movie. And there's still some stuff in there that's probably not science. But actually, when they rendered the black hole in Interstellar, I don't know, I'm getting so off topic, but when they rendered the black hole in Interstellar, this is really interesting. They took 100 hours per frame to render the black hole because it's literally based on its embedded mathematical equations in the renderer. Which is
really cool. I didn't know that.
So that's how much depth Interstellar went into, and even their travel.
Well, and I really
their FTL travel is through a wormhole.
I was just going to talk about the wormhole,
which should not, if you consider the sphere of the wormhole, it should be instantaneous, right? Yeah. It's essentially like two barriers of space touching each other, just like every other point in space, and so it should just be we're there, right? But that's not what happens,
right?
So,
well, yeah, and I mean, they do make that a little bit.
They give it a narrative,
dramatic. They make it dramatic for the scene, but
to go back to what you were saying, for sci-fi, for pretty much any sci-fi, they have to draw the time out because part of like stories is people going to different places, and you don't usually just like blink from place to place. Usually, some time is happening and passing.
Well, but you have to think when they're talking about like warp speed in Star Trek or hyperspace in Star Wars, or I can't remember the technology in Mass Effect that they use to do their jumps.
Mass drivers and
they're mass drives, right? Yeah. They're big Mass Effect.
Well,
drives.
the mass driver is those big key-looking space stations, and then they use it's another type of mass drive, but it's like the miniaturized. It has a different name, but it's what causes the entire ship mass to go to near zero. And that's the interesting thing about Mass Effect is the mass drivers do something that the rest of the galaxy can't do, which is make the mass of the ships less than zero.
Right.
So they have negative mass, and that's how it propels them. That's really interesting. I always thought Mass Effect had a great system with their element zero.
Oh, and one day we'll talk about that particular.
For sure.
All of the science behind that and all of the fantasy behind that too.
Yeah.
Because Mass Effect, for one, is probably one of my favorites. But if you look at all of those different ones, it's just like it's FTL, faster than light travel, right? I mean, I understand that
there's never any causality problems. That's one thing that they don't get.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
you could say don't get right, but I mean, who really knows?